All right. So by the time my cousin and I got in our 20s, we began to diverge in our philosophies. So when things converge means they come together. When things diverge, they grow apart. So by the time I was 24, decided I didn't want to have any kids. Decided to move on with my life. By the time he was also 24, he decided that he wanted to have kids and also decided to move on his life. My philosophy was I didn't really necessarily like my upbringing, therefore, having children would compound my problems. His philosophy was more or less he wanted to bring awesome humans into this world in order to solve problems. So we decided to go in complete opposite directions. Therefore, when he decided to get married, it was a very big deal. In the wedding speech that I had posted many months ago, I was only limited to about 2 minutes of runtime. I didn't want to bore people. Plus, they had told me to keep it very concise. And originally, I wanted to have the speech based on the concept of an arc. If you think of a circle is 360 degrees, so it goes like this. An arc is half in a circle, and it goes 180 degrees. So it basically goes from here, here, and across. Therefore, my cousin Ricky and I had very similar upbringings in the very beginning. However, our arcs had diverged when we were in our 20s. So if we're going almost like in a straight line, that straight line basically goes into like a Y shape. So there's forks in the roads. And moving on. Uh, so really to start with, so how we are similar, how grew apart is that both my cousin Ricky and we are one of many children. So my father has about close to 10 children. His father, my uncle, has also close to about 10 children, and they're about the same age. So very similar upbringings. Let's see. So both of our pasts are very complicated. Like his parents were never married. Both my biological mother and biological father were never married as well. However, um, he has one full brother, many half siblings. I have no half brothers or half siblings, so all my siblings are all half siblings. So my cousin, the groom, has lived with his biological father pretty much all of his life. I never lived with my biological father except for possibly one summer out of my 18 years as a child, and then I moved out of my mom's house. Um, Another difference is that my cousin, the groom, he pretty much not really had to, but he ended up raising his full brother from the time his little brother, we call him Mason, was a baby up until adulthood. So basically, he's been a father since he was a child. This isn't to say that like my uncle wasn't being a father or anything. It's just when you grow up with so many siblings and you only have one full sibling, you two pretty much gravitate toward each other. For me, I was the only child by my mother and father, so I pretty much grew up an only child up until my early 20s. Now, having half siblings is one thing, but it's another thing when you have a lot of them under the same roof as you. And so, my uncle, my cousin's father, um, ended up getting married to a woman who was not the mother of my cousin, who is the groom. So, like having blended families is kind of messy. Um, don't really recommend it. And so, the reason why like having blended families is problematic is because kids almost become factionalized by default, even though there's a closeness to them. There's always going to be differences. Um, So when he was a kid, he had many different people under one roof. Um, that doesn't include other children outside of that one roof that my uncle has to support. So basically, what problems does that cause? It causes problems with like resources, familiar problems, philosophy, and mindset. Um, so growing up in middle school, my cousin, the groom, and really also we became different from like the rest of our siblings. Even though my cousin and I didn't really grow up under the same roof, we began to become different from our siblings, and we grew to be, I guess, abnormal. And so, I guess, what does it mean to be abnormal? Whenever you define normal, in this case, we will define it as like, what does it mean as it pertains to like being black? Um, let's start with my cousin. Call him Uncle E. His upbringing. He grew up in more of a tight knit community in South Carolina before he moved to North Carolina. It was more, I guess, more community involved. Um, Now, when we think about like community, I had to look up Google, and Google defines community basically as a group of people living under the same place or having particular same characteristics in common, or two, a fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. And I guess growing up, when my uncle grew up, why was there such a need for togetherness? Was there another choice? Basically, my uncle grew up in the dirt on the dirt roads of Berkeley County, South Carolina, and so uh, I remember stories of where like both my uncles used to play like tackle football like out on the fields where their parents and grandparents used to work. There's like large spaces of space between like one house and the other house. They grew up on oldies, so they used to go to the juke joint and things like that. Um, for a while, like in the early 2000s, certain folks used to wear like baggy clothing and things like that. When both my uncles were growing up, they were very heavily involved in the church. So where we're from in South Carolina, we all grew up Baptist. So the church and God and prayer and things like that were very important. But as my cousin and I grew older, we started to become very different from both our fathers. And for example, like my cousin Eric or Ricky, he doesn't like sports. So his father grew up on dirt roads playing tackle football without pads on dirt fields playing sports. His favorite team is the Dallas Cowboys. His son, who just got married, does not like sports at all, refers to it as sports ball. Um, my cousin Ricky, he likes to play video games. My uncle Eric does not play video games whatsoever. My uncle Eric, he likes oldies and music and like R&B and things like that. Whereas my cousin Ricky, the groom, he prefers more heavy metal. So I remember, I think like late elementary, early middle school, he started getting into like rock, heavy metal, horrorcore, not really horrorcore, but very deep metal and things like that. It still listens to it, but not the rest of his siblings were into that type of stuff. So he had to grow up pretty much as an outlier versus like the rest of his siblings. When it came to clothing, like my cousin, the groom who got married, started wearing like tighter clothing, which is a lot different than his father and everyone else. Which I wear tight clothing on occasion to show my muscles, but I didn't wear skinny jeans till like later on in life. And then when it came to religion, basically by the time I was 16, I decided that I was an atheist. And then my cousin Ricky as well also decided he was an atheist, which starkly contrasted from the way our great grandparents grew up, grandparents and parents and so on and so forth growing up. So he basically grew up to be like the black sheep of the family. So there's this almost isolation and growing apart as this person is going through his adolescence. Um, by the time my cousin is in middle school, he is down to basically one of his biological parents who's still living. Not going to get into that. It's not really um, something I want to get into for the sake of this series. But he's down to one parent. He's living with his biological father. They kind of grow apart in how they see the world, but he's still under his father's roof. And so some questions start to arise, like, is he, my cousin, going through a phase? Is he actively going out of his way to be rebellious? Um, and there's a lot of, like, I saw some of it, but he could probably tell you more. May or may not get into it, but it's like I also see things from a father's perspective. It's like, well, what is the father supposed to do when the son he is named after himself, who carries his likeness as far as like his facial features, this, that, and the third, ends up becoming the opposite of who he wants him to be. And so as the series goes on, one of the major themes of I Was a Groomsman is establishing oneself, becoming his own man and making his own decisions. Um, this is a period in my cousin's life from is where he's transitioning from being a boy to becoming his own man. Um, at now as we grow up, both Baptists and eventually going our own ways, but still one of the tenets of growing up is the father is the head of the household and we follow his direction. But what if we, the children, don't necessarily agree with how the father is carrying things? And so there's going to be conflict when the son has a different view versus the patriarch. And that conflict in itself has like a consolation prize, which is isolation and being the black sheep in the household, um, which can probably lead to like having no one to turn to, that he can see daily and things like that.